Welcome to this week's episode of Let's Chat with Derick. I am your host, Derick Fage. My guest today is an award winning mental health advocate. He's also the host of Life in Red podcast. He is an unsinkable ambassador. And I will say as well, he's probably one of the most authentic people you will find on social media as he shares his story and his journey. And he's going to share that with us this morning. I'm joined by Ryan Forsyth. Ryan, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Derek, man, thank you for the intro and thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, it's my pleasure. First of all, congratulations on the award. I know it's something you took a lot of pride in. You're so excited. To be recognized like that is certainly an incredible accomplishment. And before we get to the reasons why you received that award, I wanted you to take us back to the beginning of your journey, your mental health journey, and take us back to those early times and when it started for you, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, my mental illness journey goes back all the way to when I was 12 years old. And I mean, I think I speak for everyone is even a couple of years ago, no one really talked about mental illness or really any of the symptoms. So when people were experiencing it, and even me at such a young age, like I had no idea what was going on. And I had no idea, like, to understand it or to talk to somebody about it, so it really started with panic attacks, and I was just a young kid, and I would kinda think of the like, one day, life has to end, and I have no choice in the matter, and I would get panic attacks, and basically what would happen is, like, I would try to take a nice deep breath in, but I couldn't, and then that would kind of start me into a little bit of a frenzy and a panic, and,
Right.
I would crying, and it was like, "Oh my gosh, is, like, this the time? Am I gonna die right now? Like, what's happening?" And, eventually it would kinda stop, and it would subside, and, but like I said, I didn't know I should be telling my parents about this. I didn't know I should be, telling friends or my teachers or someone at school. So that's kind of how it all started. And as I got older, the more symptoms of depression started to come in. And it
Okay.
wasn't at the time when I finished college and, everyone kind of goes through that transition where everything you once knew you grew up with high school and you make that transition to having to get a full-time job and start your life. It's a tough time on anybody really because it's such a
Yeah.
different what you know, and you go back to your hometown and all your friends are gone and everything's changed. But you kind of pair that with a couple other things that were going on. I was in a bad relationship that I was kind of too scared to leave and deal with, and I got my first job in radio, and I was so happy, but it wasn't quite working out the way we wanted it to, and I was having a ton of anxiety because I call people on the phone, and that was like I had such anxiety about it that I would throw up every morning before work, and you
Really?
kind of pair all these
Wow.
yeah, you pair all these kind of external factors into some of the things that I was feeling inside that I wasn't quite dealing with, and, I kind of came to a point in my life where I decided that, I didn't wanna live anymore, and, I tried to take my own life. But obviously, I'm still here, and,
Thank goodness.
I got help. I started on medication, started on a little bit of therapy, but, like, just th through the trials and tribulations of life, I I would, like, kinda get into highs when things were going well, and then when things weren't going quite well, I was getting into extreme lows, and there was just a day, it was a Let's Talk Day in 2015, and I decided to share my story on social media for the first time. So no one really knew that I was struggling. Everyone kind of knew me as the guy who likes to tell jokes, who's super happy, who would do anything for anyone. And I put out that story I just kind of shared about trying to take my own life at one point. And I just shared it in a tweet, not really thinking much of it. But the feedback I got not only from my friends, my family, my coworkers, people who knew me, but from complete strangers who are reaching out to me, saying they felt the same way and that, kind of that sentiment that you're not alone. It was
Yeah.
from that moment on that I knew, or if I guess I learned that sharing my story and the way I felt, good or bad, it was really resonating with people because I still think that a lot of people are afraid to share how they feel. So I kind of just took that in stride, and ever since, at least on social media, sharing the way I felt, which led into more things down the road, like the personal speaking and the podcast and all that type of stuff.
Ryan, it's very difficult for I mean, you just described it. It's difficult people to reach out. I think we're very fortunate that we have more resources than we've ever had before. I mean, we still have a lot of work to do when it comes to mental health and helping people in particular. During this pandemic, I think we're going to see years from now, that a lot of people are going to have some mental health issues. We all know somebody now, I think, that has had some form of mental illness, dealing with mental health issues. But to just walk me through the challenge of finally realizing, okay, I need to get help. But what how difficult was it to reach out, and how difficult was it to find the resources?
So I'm incredibly fortunate. My mom is a healthcare professional. So and she suffers like we're the same type of, she deals with the exact same thing. So it wasn't a huge surprise. Um
Okay.
I didn't tell anybody about, my suicide attempt until much later. That I was still very scared to tell people about. But I knew that if I got to that point and for whatever reason it went the way it did, that okay, like I do need help. If I can get to that point, like it's really important to talk to somebody. So I know for my story is different from a lot of other ones I've heard as I've gotten to this journey. And I went to my family doctor right away after talking with my mom and got put on medication. And I was just again more fortunate that I know a lot of people get, because especially when you get into crisis, it gets a lot more difficult to navigate and find the resources to help yourself. Um,
Yeah.
so again, it can be tough for a lot of people, and I know therapy isn't always the least inexpensive thing in the world to get. But it became more of a finding out ways that I can work on this myself in tandem with professional resources. So it's kind of like a holistic combination of all these different things that I've gathered to try to help deal with my mental illness and improve my mental health.
Well, and I think a part of that is, your transition to speaking publicly, to fundraising efforts and that sort of thing. You'd put it on social media. You got this outpouring of support from people, from complete strangers. Was that, is that what moved you into, what, I can make a difference. I'm going to use my voice to try to help others, no matter what sort of challenge they're going through. Is that what pushed you in that direction?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, when you get people that who I probably shared a similar reaction to learning about what I went through. Like it's the same thing for me when I hear it's like, oh my gosh, like really, you struggle too? I would never have guessed based on our interactions that you also struggle. And it was people who I wasn't even really close to in high school, that I loosely knew, who were reaching out in support and telling me their stories. And then it was the complete stranger factor to have people you don't even know and then form these connections based on your experiences and your feelings. Like it is a really profound impact to know that just by putting out something that you feel, whether you think it's big or small, whether it's I'm feeling lonely in this pandemic on a Saturday night, or it's something a little bit more like, I'm really low and I had to go to therapy today. That there are a lot of people who are kind of sitting there suffering in silence in a way, or just really unsure of themselves and their feelings and their emotions. And just to know that by me saying it, like they're like, oh, okay, like I'm not weird. Like other people are feeling this way too. It just,
Yeah.
to me, I was like, okay, wow, getting so many of these messages just kind of pushed me, because for whatever reason, I can't explain it, but I've never had an issue sharing. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing in some cases, especially on social media, but it's never been a problem for me to get things off my chest and share the way I'm feeling. And then, as we progress and learn more about how things happen in life, to tell people how I've overcome some things, or how I at least work on things and things I found success in that have really helped. Um, yeah, it's turned into a more, impactful role, and especially when you get into young teenagers and young men, especially, that's something I really
Mhm.
gravitate towards now, because I know, like, when I was 16 playing competitive hockey, there was no way I was ever talking about being sad. I did not want to be the weak link and get made fun of,
Yeah.
and trying to, but at that same time, that was when part of my mental illness was starting to manifest and really start to affect parts of my life. And so I want to kind of take the message of, mistakes I've made and things I've learned, and share it with young people to hopefully give them encouragement and inspiration and some tools and resources, so when things start to, go the way they did for me, that they at least know, okay, wow, like, I recognize this is not something I should be feeling. Let's talk to somebody and let's see if we can get some help.
Yeah, and I imagine that's what led you to the creation of your podcast, the Life in Red podcast. So tell me, the importance of that for you personally, and the feedback that you've gotten from people, because I think when we discuss mental health and we talk about our own challenges, I've been very open and honest about my own as well, being born with chronic fecal incontinence. It's that response you even get just from one person. It doesn't matter if you reach one, or if you reach a million people, as long as you reach one. Is that part of the idea behind the podcast, right?
Yeah, there's a couple things that kind of got me inspired on it, and one is, just meeting people and sharing experiences, whatever they are. And I know, with, I come from traditional media, and as well, like, there's just certain things that, you just sometimes you can't talk about for whatever reason, or you can't really get into detail because it, might trigger some people or hurt some people. But with a podcast, it's kind of, you can kind of do whatever you want. And it started of just finding ways to have important conversations and authentic conversations to help me. And it really only started with just kind of helping me, and it turned into, like,
Right.
helping other people. But just understand how, you know, things work, how people work, how people think, how people got to certain places. And there's the mental illness aspect of it, but I've also tackled things like, racism and LGBTQ issues, and all these different things. And the thing that really got me, and right around this time when I started it, is there was a lot going on Twitter. It was 2018, and you know what I mean, like, just the conversations we were having. It just I got
Yeah.
really sucked in. Like, you can see it right now. You can see people kind of get sucked into the rabbit hole of what's going on in politics and culture and society, and you can get really lost in it. And that's what happened to me. And I got a really unhealthy obsession that it started, like, that's became all I talked about. And I couldn't sleep. I was getting, like, anxiety attacks. And I was like, uh, and it took my ex-girlfriend at the time to kind of snap me out of it, and being like, like, "Are you okay?" Like, and realizing that the way we consume information and have these really important conversations and on social media, without the humanity of, me sitting, at least I was doing them in person, but now still with a screen, I can see you. You can see my
Yeah.
reactions. You can see my mannerisms. And you know, I don't think we're meant to have these really important conversations through text, and without seeing the humanity in each other, because it's just, I mean, we all know it. It's not going anywhere on social media. So the podcast was kind of a combination of all those things, and just having real conversations about whether it's mental health, or whether it's, something that's really kind of touchy, or it's just, with fun scientists or actors or musicians. It's just, I get a mental health boost by learning and hearing really cool stories, and learning new things. And it's like, okay, well, if I can help me, I'm sure it can help other people. And then now, like 2 years and a couple months later, the messages you get, and not only from guests but listeners, and you're like, wow, even my small little independent podcast can have an effect on people. It's like, woo, okay, like here we go.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned, this news wheel, and you and I are in media, so we need to educate ourselves. We need to be knowledgeable. We have to know what's happening in our community, in our country, around the world. But social media, what can happen is you can be consumed by it, and the amount of negativity, unfortunately, on social media is very harmful to our mental health. So I can certainly understand how, if you were in that situation where you were just absolutely consumed, and it can really deteriorate your mental health. I think it's something, especially during these times, Ryan, that if we don't step back every now and then, it can become a real danger to our mental health.
It it can, and it did for me. I will
Yeah,
say it was probably the some of the darkest times I've ever been, and it was just I was taking things personally that some stranger, like, not even talking to me, like, just putting out a tweet, like, like, "All men are trash," and it's kinda like, "No, I'm not. I'm a good person. Look at all the nice things I'm doing," and I can't say why I was taking it so personally. I don't really know, but, it's just we put out things in the universe and on social media that we don't think people are gonna read. We say it as a joke. It just we think it doesn't have any meaning before it. We're just talking with our friends. But, like, the thing is, like, people who might be going through something else can see that and interpret it in a way that can harm them. And
yeah.
it's hard to think about because there's millions of people on these apps and websites that are just talking all the time and want to be heard and go viral and be famous. But it is important to remember that there are also a lot of people who just excuse me, kind of internalize things. And it's something that, because I went through it and I've heard stories of other people who went through it, that, I become a little bit more mindful of what I'm going to put out, especially when it comes to jokes or
Yeah.
something that, just because I think it's funny, like, I don't know how that's going to affect somebody else. So I think a little bit more carefully before I put that out. It's like, especially with like a politics joke or something about that. Like, it just, if sometimes it hurts people, it fan the flames of dissent and anger, and I just don't want to be a part of that, if I can help it.
Well, and Ryan, it's easy to dismiss, right? Because a lot of people say it, right? They say, "Oh, it's just words, right? Don't. I mean, it shouldn't affect you. It's just." But words have meaning, right? Words affect people. What you say, what you write, what you type, you have no idea the effect it's going to have on somebody else. And I think we've all been. You described it. We've all been in the position where perhaps we get into a debate and we're passionate about it, but the way that we communicate our opinion can be very hurtful to other people, right? And and vice versa. People don't realize how much they can be hurting us. So again, I always say, you want to stay educated. You want to know what's happening, around the world in your community. But it's also, I think, important to take a step back and step off social media. But I want to stay on social media because I mentioned off the top that I really find that you're one of the most authentic people on social media, and you do a lot of fun stuff, you do some goofy things. Was it important for you to make sure that people saw you as authentic as you started to share your journey and tell your story and be very honest about the mental health issues you've had and continue to have, I
Absolutely.
should
And
say?
yeah, it's super important for me to be authentic, because when you think of mental illness, I think sometimes people who aren't around it, they might get a sense that, you know, just because you're mentally ill, whether it's, depression or anxiety or, excuse me, bipolar disorder, whatever it is, that in your worst times, that you can't get out of bed, or maybe you're mopey and sad all the time. And, what I'm trying to do is, I continue to struggle every day, with suicidal thoughts, with self, esteem issues, with all these different types of things, anxiety about everything. Just because I suffer from that all that, it doesn't mean, I can't have fun, or, like, I don't have fun ideas, or I can't share a fun story, or I don't think about other things. And one of the most important things for me is when I started to be more of a public face for mental health and advocate and speak about it, that I I I didn't want that to be all I am, you know what I mean? I
Yeah.
don't want to be known as just the mental health guy who, "Oh,
Right.
yeah, there's Ryan again. He's sad, he's lonely, he's this and that." Like, it's something I work through with therapy, because I think a lot of people, once we get something we're truly passionate about and we start advocating, we speak, and we know things, and people start to gravitate towards us because they look for us for whether it's guidance, or their thoughts, or whatever it is. It really becomes ingrained as our identity. And it happens with people at work. People become their jobs. And for me, it was
Yeah.
really important that I don't want to just be the sad mental illness guy. I'm more than that in person. And if you know me, I love to joke around. I love to have fun. I love to make people laugh, and I love to talk about politics and all these different things. And for me, you know, I want to show all the sides of me. And like I said a little earlier, that I don't know what it is. I can't tell you this moment where all of a sudden everything was okay, but I don't have a problem sharing, whether it's my dating life, whether it's a political thought, whether it's a mental illness thing. I've never had a problem sharing it. And I know now, just from experience, that we are all so much more than one thing, and it's important that we don't become so entrenched in this idea of ourselves, and the thing that validates us and makes us important, because you're never really going to be truly happy if that's what it is. It's important to embrace all the different aspects of your personality, and that's something I've did very recently. And it took a while, and that's something, you talk about with, like, toxic masculinity, is never thought I would, but here I am loving musicals. That just kinda came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden they made me super
I am the
happy, and I'm like,
I so relate to this.
"Yeah,
It's so funny because I was always, I always kept that at a distance. I don't like musicals. They're terrible, and it's so funny because I never even watched them. And then my
yep,
wife loves musicals, and she loves the Engelbert Humperdinck, and these great crooners, right? And I don't like those. And then all of it, I'm introduced to it thanks to my wife. I love musicals. I love crooners. I mean, sometimes you just ignore it because you feel that, oh, I guess that's what men do, right? We're not supposed to like
mhm."
musicals. We're not supposed to be emotional. I'm not supposed to go to an Engelbert Humperdinck concert with my wife and actually enjoy it. And all of those things I enjoy, and I know toxic masculinity is something that you've talked about. So I think it's up to men, quite frankly, and I think you probably agree, Ryan. If we're going to help in this effort, right, for equal rights for women, for equality for women in on so many levels, it has to come from us, and I think that's where someone like yourself feeling that I need to be a messenger, right? I need to take it upon myself. When did you start having that realization?
It really was just last year. It was the beginning of the lockdowns. It was the darkest place I've been, since that time when I was 21. I was lost. Everything was just, it was not going well for me. And then on top of that, my my ex now, but she broke up with me in the pandemic, which is fine. But, like, just I went through this just awful time. And some of the things that brought me out of it, of course, exercise, getting outside. But like I said about the musicals, I watched The Greatest Showman, and I loved the movie and the soundtrack so much. Like, I would listen to it all the time. I'd be working out to it. Like, it just made me
Nice.
so happy. And
Yeah.
so I started embracing some of these things that I never really thought about enjoying before, traditional, more feminine, or whatever you want to call it, but things that traditional men don't typically enjoy. And it came to a point, and it was very, very recently when Harry Styles was having all that controversy by wearing a dress, and there was grown men I knew who, I grew up, idolizing or listening to their advice, whether it's for hockey or whatever, were like losing their minds about Harry Styles wearing a dress. I'm like, what is how well, like, who cares? Like, he looks good. This guy, he is an icon for, like, women love him. Like, this guy, like,
Yeah.
it does not matter. And to see people, men specifically, lose their, like, just go bonkers because of him wearing a dress, I was like, "No, no, no, no. This is not how it's supposed to work. This is not healthy. This is not good." And these men are teaching their sons to think the same thing. And, going to this whole
It's scary.
conversation, women absolutely have their place in this conversation, and so does the LGBT community, and we have a lot to learn from them for acceptance and equality and learning about what we redefining masculinity. But, people who resist this idea, they're really only gonna listen to other men, and unfortunately, like, that's the sad part of it. But you're right, it is kind of
Yeah.
up to men to not get defensive with them on it, I guess you could say, but it's
Yeah.
showing
Agreed.
how much of a
100%.
happier life you can, yeah, it's how much of a happier life you can live by just embracing the things you enjoy. If you don't like musicals, that's okay. It's absolutely okay. But nothing says that I'm less of a man because I'm lifting something very heavy and feeling really good about it with my muscles popping, but I'm listening to Carly Rae Jepsen in my earphones, like, kind of dancing along.
Yeah.
Those 2 things are not like, mutually exclusive to masculinity. They are I am still a man, and I can dance around to musicals, and then I can go chop wood right after. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I'm still a man, and I'm much happier because I'm embracing these elements that you told me I'm not allowed.
Ryan, for the record, I have worn dresses on many occasions. As I was a member of a murder mystery company for many years, and we didn't have a lot of women at one point, and so I had the nicest legs from all the guys, and it was one of the best experiences I've ever had. As a matter of fact, I had so much fun. It was fantastic. We're just running out of time here, so I want to make sure people
Mhm.
can find you on social media and find out where they can find your podcast as well, Ryan.
Yeah, so Life in Red podcast is, on all the platforms, Spotify, YouTube, and Apple. Everywhere you get them, it's at lifeandredpodcast.com and at Life and Red Podcast on Instagram, and I'm at Big Red Ryan 01. I should probably get a better handle, but, well, here we are, right? So,
Well, thank you so much for spending time with us, Ryan. Really appreciate it. Take care and stay safe, stay healthy.
yeah, you too, Derek. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It was a really great conversation.
That's my pleasure.